Funding for Shaperless is provided by Squarespace, the sponsor of today's video. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Hey, I watched Loki. It was okay. Yeah, I don't know. This one just didn't quite do it for me, even though everyone else seems to be raving about it. That's cool. I'm very glad people are finding an MCU project that they really enjoy. But I don't know, these MCU TV shows are just getting weaker for me as they go along. WandaVision was great, but really fumbled things in its final episode, and it dragged the whole show down with it. Falcon and Winter Soldier was pretty solid, but its last episode gets worse the more I think about it, to the point where I'd probably lower the score I gave to a 6 out of 10. And Loki, despite probably having the best final episode of these 3 shows, doesn't really start off on a good foot. The first 2 episodes of this show have their moments. Like, I really enjoyed the scene where Loki just watches the other MCU movies and gets really emotional during his death scene, cause like, same. I thought it was clever how the variant hid in apocalypses that couldn't offer any branching futures, and it was neat to see Loki and Mobius figure that out. But for the most part, these first 2 episodes are just needlessly long setup for how the TVA works, and explaining all the dense time travel terminology that even I had a hard time following at some points. It quickly becomes apparent that Loki is not a show about Loki. It's about the TVA, which, despite being a fascinating concept on paper, isn't really that interesting in practice. So much of the show is spent in these sterile, brown and gray offices and hallways, and I feel like I'd like it a lot more if it was more visually creative. Especially for a show about Loki, of all characters. That's another problem I have with this show. I feel like they generally nerfed Loki and made him a lot less clever than he usually is. Like in episode 3, which I think we can all agree is the low point of the entire show. I feel like in a stealth mission, Loki would never get drunk and bring so much attention to himself to the point where he gets thrown off the train, unless it was part of his plan. I kept waiting for the reveal that he planned all that, but nope, he really is just way more incompetent than he is in the movies. And yeah, overall, this episode mostly kinda sucked. I liked the scene where Loki and Sylvie were just vibing on the train, and that was about it. For the most part, this episode was slow, tedious, and visually just awful. The overall colors and the special effects of this planet just look really off. I guess I did want something different from the brown and gray TVA offices, and hey, they're not even in this episode at all, so I should like it, right? Unfortunately, no, this doesn't really do it for me either. It only exists to bring Loki and Sylvie together, and while I guess it accomplishes that, it's still needlessly drawn out. Story-wise, it could have ended when they got thrown off the train and Sylvie screamed. The rest of the episode added nothing, and that one-shot take was kinda slow and unimpressive by one-shot take standards. At this point, I just figured the show wasn't for me, and I should stop watching, but fortunately, that's when it got good. Episode 4 really picked up the slack by shattering the status quo and making me question who was behind everything and who there was to trust. And episode 5 was the only one of this show I'd call great. First of all, the scene with all the Loki variants was amazing. Going into the show, this is what I wished and expected the tone to be. Just utter wacky Loki nonsense chaos, and I ate it up. The new variants Loki meets are likable, his relationships with both Sylvie and Mobius are well defined here, the stakes are really high and the threat is palpable, and even though it was very predictable that old Loki would sacrifice himself, it was still a really nice moment. Episode 5 is honestly just episode 3 but good, which kinda makes episode 3 even worse in hindsight, but oh well. I liked it a lot. Episode 6 was decent, I think? Not a total letdown like WandaVision and Falcon's finales, and it's also different because this is a season finale that's more so teasing what happens next in season 2. But I don't know, on its own, it's really just 30 minutes of sitting here and listening to this guy talk. At one point, he plays with his little models to illustrate his point, but for the most part, this finale is entirely exposition with one sword duel at the end and a vague tease of the crazy stuff that's gonna happen next time. It didn't feel especially climactic, it felt like setup. Set up for something potentially super cool and interesting, but set up nonetheless. Which is kind of how a lot of the weaker Marvel projects are, unfortunately. And Loki Season 1 is definitely one of the weaker ones. It wasn't bad, but I think it's pretty telling how such a reality-shattering event for the MCU just didn't really entice me. I'm not looking forward to season 2 of this show, even though on paper it sounds like it'll be way more interesting. But I'm just not that invested in Loki and Sylvie's relationship, or Mobius's quest to take down the TVA. These are all fine characters and the performances are great, but overall I just felt a certain disconnect with this show's plot and characters. I felt for Wanda, Vision, Sam, and Bucky's struggles, but I felt like the focus of this show was too split to really get as invested in Loki and Sylvie's. By the end, it just feels like they're pawns in setting up the MCU multiverse. It feels like any characters could have done this, and the show only ever scratches the surface of what a Loki-centric series can accomplish. I think I just miss when we only had 3 Marvel movies every year to keep up with, because after 3 weekly shows in a row, I'm more MCU fatigued than ever. I still think the MCU is really good. Nothing has changed since that love letter I made for it 2 years ago. But at the same time, part of me really wishes it had just ended with Endgame. I know that's not realistic because capitalism, but so far, I haven't really been that into Phase 4, and I probably won't be until we get Taika or James Gunn back. Seriously though, imagine how great and batshit insane Loki would have been if Taika directed it. It would have been a match made in heaven. Anyway, I guess I'll give season 1 of Loki a 6 out of 10, and I'm being a bit generous to be honest. Episodes 4 and 5 were just really good and kinda sorta worth watching the show for, I guess. And why did they use holding out for a hero in that opening scene of episode 2? Yeah, you knew I was gonna talk about that. What the hell was the idea there? Who's the hero in this scenario? The scene is so aggressively mediocre and it doesn't go with the absolute banger of a song at all. You should be ashamed of yourselves, Marvel. But wow, there sure are so many Loki variants. We really could use someone to keep track of the different Lokis out there. Maybe they could make a website to catalog and categorize every single Loki variant. And how can that be accomplished? You already know, silly head. With Squarespace. Squarespace is a fantastic, intuitive online website builder that allows you to create beautiful websites for your business or personal hobby. Present your work using Squarespace's professional portfolio designs. Display projects in customizable galleries and add password-protected pages to share private work with clients. You can even present your videos from YouTube, Vimeo, and Animoto on your Squarespace site. Add an image overlay to your video to improve your website's load speed by waiting to embed video players until playback starts. Every design automatically includes a unique mobile experience that matches the overall style of your website, so your content will look great on every device, every time. And if you don't want that, you can always disable the mobile view from Website Manager. Buying a domain from Squarespace is simple because there are no hidden fees or price hikes. Each domain comes with an ad-free parking page and free WHOIS privacy on eligible domains. Squarespace sells over 200 top-level domains, so you can find the perfect name for your website. Choose a URL that ends in .com, .net, .org, or if you're feeling funky, you can get a more specific one like .art. If you're ready to share your passions or promote your business with the rest of the world, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/shapeforless to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.